Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Full Time Grievers. I want to give you a little bit of context for this episode. So, this is actually the second half of a longer conversation that Nathan and I had about forgiveness and grief. And when I went to edit it, it became obvious to me that they needed to be separate so that each one could breathe. So, the first half of this conversation is episode 16. You don't owe forgiveness, so why offer it? In that episode, we get into how forgiveness can be a radical act of self-love and how to work through forgiving the person who passed away, as well as forgiving yourself. And in this episode, we get more into the details of forgiving the doctors, the family members surrounding the death, and also about forgiving the person who died just for dying. And if you haven't seen episode 16, you might want to check that one out first. But this one can also totally stand alone on its own. Let's get into it. So, other types of forgiveness, there can also be forgiveness of anyone who was involved in the dying process and the settling of affairs process. It's a very dramatic time when someone
Mhm.
dies. And it's so tempting to blame the doctors or blame the paramedics or be angry at the people not giving you a say in the end of life arrangements. And
Mhm.
so that's another big category.
Yeah, I think I would include even people that are on your team in the process, like other
Mhm.
like family members or siblings or, parents or whoever else might be involved in making, those decisions, as you say, what to do with the person's body, cremation or not cremation, burial or not burial, what kind of memorial or not memorial, or celebration of life versus funeral, like all these kinds of decisions that someone is making, and it may not be you, but you have to live with the choices that they make, and that can easily bring up some real pain, that anger and resentment that we want to navigate so that we can get to the other side and forgive and not let that be a block to our grieving process.
Mhm.
Or in the relationship with that other person who's still with us that just happens to disagree with us on these arrangements. I definitely ran into that.
Yeah. It's a it feels like a very walking on eggshells time within family right after a family member has died. And I think everyone's reactivity is higher. A lot of people's opinions are going to be louder than they normally are. And it's a time of, I've found it to be a time of a lot of drama in myself and in my clients. And just
Yeah.
kind of holding that awareness a couple of months and years after the person has died, looking back on that and just not taking it too personally.
Yeah. I've had clients who like cut ties with family members for a period or for a long time, or were trying to figure out if that's what they needed to do over
Mhm.
issues like this, where they had been pretty close before. So, like you're saying, yes, it's such a period of higher reactivity. Nervous systems are in elevated hypervigilance, and simple, quote unquote, simple decisions seem much more complex, and the how important a particular decision is to one person over another can be pretty different and invite challenges as well. If you really think that the person who passed wanted to be buried and the other person who may be making a decision thinks they really wanted to be cremated, I mean, that can be something that you didn't anticipate but can really get in between you. So yeah.
And this is why it's really great to leave an advance directive of exactly what you want to have happen to you.
Yes,
It actually
absolutely.
can mitigate a huge amount of this drama.
Yeah, and if you have particular things that you want, for sure that can be so reassuring to even the nervous systems, let alone the emotional systems of the people that you leave behind. if
Mm-hmm.
you've spelled that out for them.
And you never know when you're going to go, so make it now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so others who are involved in making decisions, in particular, or are also involved in the grieving of your loved one, and or practitioners who maybe made decisions or were involved in certain parts, and you agreed or disagreed with things that they did. I want to. I also want to talk. Some of us have a higher power or death or you know whatever you want to call it, out there that we assign responsibility for the passing of our loved one or the reason that they're no longer in our lives. And many of us have a lot of anger and resentment come up toward that entity, however we identify it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is like one that's often a little more understood, like, oh yeah, people are going to have that kind of thing. Of course, they would be mad at so and so, or mad at God, or mad at Creator, or mad at death, or whatever. And then some people are really uncomfortable with that because they don't want you to be like drawing any lightning bolts down on you or on them, you know. But I think it's a really common one when we can't, like reality says we can't question the death, and the practitioners and the other people involved making the decisions made the decisions that they're made. We have already done everything that we did or could do or didn't do, and so it's really normal, understandable for us to then turn toward, well, who else could be to blame for this. I definitely had that. And I know I have worked with many clients who are like, some of them like leave the religion that they were in, or they have a real shift in their spirituality, or, they find themselves cursing their higher power. I got in a shouting match in the closet with death a number of times where I was just like, everything I could think of to say that was in line with my anger, I was leveling at death, just like all the F bombs and all the how could yous and all I'll never, whatever, anything I could think of that was essentially making war on that entity, I let out. And I think it can be pretty activating and scary to let yourself go to that level where you're like, shaking your fist at the heavens, so to speak, or literally. But I do find that, much like the other processes that we're talking about here with forgiveness, allowing ourselves to have that level of emotion, you know, sitting with it, getting it expressed through us in some way, really paves the way for us to then approach with forgiveness later. And if we hold back on the, oh, I can't be mad at God, or I can't be mad at, my higher power, spirit, or death, or, that's scary or too dangerous, and we hold that back, then we're probably also holding back the opportunity to bring the forgiveness there.
Yes. And I think that having that anger at the higher power is kind of a natural step.
Mm-hmm.
And I would want to invite people to go through the step, to take the step and to not resist it, to let it take its course on you, kind of the same way that you let any emotion take its course on you, which then leads to it being gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to go through the only way through is through. You've got
Yeah.
to go through it to get to the other side and to get to that forgiveness and understanding that whether or not you're someone that believes that everything happens for a reason, just coming to in terms of acceptance that it happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by the Center for Emotional Education and Sacramento Reiki Center, where we support full-time grievers every day. Many of our clients have tried everything and it still hasn't been enough. After our work together, they gain the tools and skills that they need to navigate their grief on their own. You can get more information at sacramentoreikicenter.com and centerforoemotionaleducation.com.
I had a devoutly Christian client who put it to me this way at one point, because we talked about, how much people can be afraid to be mad at their own higher power, regardless of your
Mhm.
religion or
Mhm.
your cosmology. And this person put it to me, after we'd navigated it together for some time. They came back and said, I had this realization that God can take it. God loves me. God is here for me. God's not going to be mad at me because I had some anger about this death. And I really loved that sense of what God can take it. I was like, yeah, yeah. If like that's your higher power, they're like the highest power, I'm sure they can
Mhm.
take it. I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a beautiful, wow. I love that. That's very beautiful.
Yeah, I liked it.
We discussed in our pre-talk talk that sometimes there can be upset that the person is gone at
Oh
all,
yeah, yeah.
and being upset at the person for being gone, even if
Mhm.
they died of a natural cause or an accident, just being angry at them. And you had a really fascinating response to that. You said, well, that's actually coming from your own inner poison. Can you say more
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was thinking about it in terms of whether we're having to forgive ourselves or forgiving, our loved one for just being gone. There's this way in which that's our own pain generating, a division between us and our person in some way.
Mhm.
And so like same process, you got to sit with it, you got to kind of distill the poison down, you got to retch the poison out in all the ways that we've talked about already, and then you still have that opportunity to approach them in forgiveness for just not being with you anymore.
Yeah.
And I think there can be a number of different layers to that, like just you're gone and how dare you. But there's also the like, oh, and you've left me, I needed you, like I still need you. There can be like, you didn't give me enough information about you leaving, like you knew
Mhm.
something and I didn't know it, or you could have warned me, or we could have been in this together, like those kinds of, or you could have taken better care of yourself is one I've heard a lot of and have definitely
That's a
experienced.
big one. Yeah.
And again, in terms of this concept of poison, I think that's a way in which we're like the hurt, they didn't do wrong to us and we didn't necessarily do wrong to them, but we're having this experience of the not rightness of their goneness just generating like its own kind of poison and pain in us. That
Mhm.
it's very understandable to want to put that as blame somewhere, because from an emotional system perspective, sitting with the pain of it, the hurt of it, the anger, the resentment, that's more uncomfortable than sitting with blame.
Mhm.
So it's like a nervous system kindness or an emotional system kindness to ourselves, that we move toward somebody's got to be responsible for this and I got to put this feeling at them instead of just having it over here. So again, I think it's that way of like, it's sort of like the poison coming up in us. And like we've said already, it's the same process of dealing with it, whether we have the sense of coming from outside of us or coming from within us. Hmm.
Let the poison go.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a really potent journey to my guides shortly after Edward passed. I've shared in other conversations that we've had that Edward showed up in my guidance shortly after he passed, and has been has become one of my ancestors that I tap into and connect with regularly. But just before that, I was connecting with my other guides really about sort of what to do. And it was like there's the like, do I just allow this grief, or do I try to like white knuckle my way through it and like be there for other people, or try to stay more regulated, or like what's my path here? And I had this really funny conversation. I say funny. You don't normally think of these powerful conversations you have with your guides as being hilarious things, but they actually often are. Um, and my guide, his name is Tin Bull, said to me, the gurus got it, or have always been misunderstood about this. When they said let it go, they didn't mean drop it. They mean let it happen, let it occur. And so whenever I even talk about, let it go, what I actually think of is, yeah, especially emotionally, we let the feeling be. We let it have its space. We let it have expression. We let it go as it needs to go. And when we
Mhm.
do, then it goes.
Yeah.
Whereas if we're just like, I'm not going to hold that feeling anymore, I'm letting it go, that doesn't really do anything. So, yes, please let it go and go and go until it doesn't need to go anymore. And then make that threshold for yourself. And when you're ready, cross it with forgiveness.
Yes. Thanks so much for listening to Full Time Grievers. Before we sign off, I want to share a little update that we're going to be taking a summer break. A big part of what we teach at Full Time Grievers is to really honor your need for rest and space and emotional integration. So we decided to practice what we preach and take the summer off for ourselves. So over the break while we're gone, feel free to go back and catch up on some old episodes and send them to people who might like them. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you can find out when we're back from our break. See you in the fall.